Right now,
Today
53.
we'll tackle tough times in
The
California.
economic troubles facing San Diego will be the focus of Mayor Jerry Sanders' annual State of the City
reports a 60% hike in rapes where either one or both people.
long process.
UCLA researchers tracked the progress of 50 sarcoma patients using a
From the KPBS studios, this is San Diego Week.
Good evening. I'm Amitha Sharma. Thanks for joining us. Japan's nuclear nightmare is not letting up. American officials say harmful radiation levels are unlikely to reach the U.S. But what does the crisis mean for the future of nuclear power? Attendance at a state-of-the-art high school in San Diego remains one of the lowest in the district. San Diego's growth rate was the slowest on record in the last decade. Plus, women in the military, they're barred from combat, but they are still getting caught in the crossfire. And finally, graffiti taggers want an image makeover. That's coming up on San Diego Week, but first, the headlines. Peggy Pico joins me from the KPBS News Center. Peggy, what did President Obama say today in his warning to Libya's leader?
In a White House speech today, President Obama told Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi to comply with UN demands for a ceasefire or face consequences that include military action.
These terms are not negotiable. These terms are not subject to negotiation. If Gaddafi does not comply with the resolution, the international community will impose consequences, and the resolution will be enforced through military action.
Obama said the U.S. would not deploy ground troops, but will work with allied forces to protect Libyan civilians from attacks by Gaddafi's regime. In Japan, they observed a moment of silence today, exactly 1 week after a massive earthquake and tsunami left more than 6,000 people dead. The death toll is expected to climb significantly as recovery continues. Japan's National Police Agency reports more than 10,000 people are unaccounted for. Nearly 2,000 San Diego County school workers received layoff notices this week. 1 in 8 teachers were told they might lose their jobs after the school year ends. The 3 districts that did not issue layoff notices were Oceanside, Poway, and the Sweetwater High School district. And the San Diego State University Aztecs made history on Thursday, winning their first ever NCAA tournament game. San Diego beat Northern Colorado in Tucson 68-50. On Saturday, the Aztecs take on Temple for a shot to advance to the Sweet 16 next week in Anaheim. You can see all of these week's top stories and more on our website, kpbs.org.
As Japan's nuclear crisis intensifies, many are wondering what the future holds for nuclear power in this country. UC San Diego engineering science professor George Tynan is here to talk about the effects of this disaster. Let's start with what Japan did today. They upgraded the threat level of the disaster. How perilous is this situation for the Japanese people?
Well, the upgrade in the threat level, I think, really reflects the consensus of the seriousness of the accident in Japan. The threat that it can pose to the Japanese people really depends upon the events from this point going forward in time. My understanding is, from what I've seen in the press and interviews with the U.S. NRC commissioner, is that the radiation release to the outer regions outside of the power plant boundaries is relatively small. It's certainly measurable, but not to the point where it could present a danger to the health of the people in the vicinity of the plant.
So that's good news. Trace amounts of radiation have been detected along the west coast here in California and north to us. The EPA has said that the levels are just far too low to have any effect on us. What level of radiation in Japan would have to be released for us to feel any kind of impact?
There would have to be many orders of magnitude increase. An order of magnitude is a factor of 10, and it would have to be many such factors increase in the rate of particulate matter release in particular in order to have an effect even in the outer regions of Japan, or certainly as far as the U.S.
Switching gears now to nuclear energy policy. How many nuclear reactors do we have here in the United States? What percentage of our energy comes from nuclear power?
There are about 103, 104 reactors operating currently in the U.S., and they together provide about 20% of the electricity that we use in the United States.
So nuclear energy is widely seen as a clean alternative to fossil fuels because it does not contribute to global warming. What kind of effect does the disaster in Japan have on that perspective, on that image that we have of nuclear power?
Oh, I'm certain that it will cause people to step back from considering nuclear energy, particularly in, say, in the West, in Europe, in the U.S., in Japan, and so forth. How long that continues, I think, in part depends upon the final outcome of this accident, and also depends upon many other factors, cost of nuclear energy, as well as the availability of other competing energy sources.
So we here in the United States, again, 20% of our electricity comes from nuclear power. What about other countries in the world?
Oh, it varies widely. In Japan, it's approaching 40% of their electricity. I think prior to this incident, they had been planning on moving that up to 45, 50% in the next decade or so. In France, it's greater than 80%. And in many other parts of the world, it can just be a fraction of a percent or even none. So it varies quite widely around the world.
So this disaster is still unfolding in Japan. So far, what can you say are the lessons that have been learned?
I think my impression is that the difficulties that the Japanese are now facing are really the result of several effects piled upon each other. You could think of this as a cascading sequence of events. Obviously, the earthquake is the first causal event, but then at that point, the power plant shut down as designed, and when the electricity in the local grid failed, the backup power systems came into play. But then the tsunami hit, and my understanding is the tsunami was larger than had been designed for, anticipated, and then the tsunami then destroyed the backup power systems, and then the subsequent failures after that began to lead to the more difficulties that they've had.
Okay, we've got about 20 seconds. What kind of impact do you expect this disaster to have on nuclear energy policy here in this country?
I think that we would be wise to learn lessons from this. It's going to take several years at least for that to occur. After we've apprised the situation, I think the country will have to think long and hard about the need for nuclear energy. In my own view, there will be a clear need for nuclear energy going forward.
Professor Tynan, thank you so much for joining us. Tonight, we continue our series on Lincoln High. The school in Southeast San Diego was rebuilt 4 years ago. It is one of the most expensive campuses in the county, built in one of the poorest neighborhoods. As KPBS reporter Joanne Farian tells us, the community had high hopes for the new school and what it would do for their children.
It was supposed to be a beacon of hope for the community and a route to college for students.
You know, the expectations were great from the community because the previous superintendent had convinced everyone that Lincoln High School needed to rise like a phoenix.
Minutes from a school board meeting back in 2001 show a lot was expected from Lincoln, a rigorous academic program so that all students were prepared for a four-year college.
See, because you're not taking this seriously.
I'm taking this seriously.
Well, what God? Come on, man. You know what I'm saying?
Mel Collins is the school's head principal. When he was hired 5 years ago, he was told by the superintendent that by 2011, 85% of graduating students were expected to complete a four-year college entry curriculum.
They wanted safety, and they wanted A through G curriculum, and they want highly trained and skilled teachers, and they wanted, and they wanted, and they wanted. And they said all of these things would come together, and promises were made. Of course, you know, how can you say no to a community that had been denied, you know, for so many years?
3 months before that 4-year deadline, Lincoln is far from achieving that goal. Last year, just 16% of the graduating class had the required courses to apply for college. Compare that to another new high school less than 20 miles north in an upper-middle-class suburb. At Westview High, a school centered between Rancho Penasquitos and Carmel Valley, 78% of graduates were college-ready last year. What a difference 20 miles can make. At Westview, 8% of the students live at or around the poverty line. At Lincoln, it's more than 80%.
De que me sentía protegida, pues.
Angelis Morales and her 2 daughters live out of 1 bedroom in a shared apartment about a mile from Lincoln. When her 10th grade daughter Jasmine wasn't showing up at school and failing nearly every subject, the school sent administrator Martha Corrales to find out why. Corrales translates.
Because sometimes there's nothing to eat. Sometimes there's problems. Because there's a lot of people here, 10 people live here, and it's 3 bedrooms.
The weekend before Corrales' home visit, the family had no food. Corrales and Principal Mel Collins bought groceries for the family and are helping them access community resources. And since that home visit, Jasmine is attending school and getting B's instead of F's. But with more than 2,000 students enrolled and one of the lowest attendance rates in the district, the task of getting students to school 1 kid at a time can be daunting.
Getting them here and then keeping them going, you know? And it's like teenagers move so slow all the time.
Before being hired as an administrator at Lincoln High, Martha Corrales worked for the San Diego Unified School District. Her binder of the minutes from old school board meetings is a reminder of the promises made to the community about what a new school would do for them and their children. Promises she made too.
I think about this all the time. I feel very sad. I said, because I did all the outreach. So this here I preached at many community meetings. This that is in here, I shared with many parents. And when many parents came to me with concerns about, but is it going to be quality education? I said, yes, it will. And yes, it will. And it's not that we don't have the quality education, it's that our students, many of our students are not prepared for that quality education.
For the first time ever, whites are in the minority in San Diego County. And even though the county is the second largest in California at 3 million residents, it saw its slowest growth rate ever in the last decade. John Weeks, professor of geography and director of the International Population Center at San Diego State University, joins me to talk about what the population changes mean. Professor, let's start with the growth rate. Over the last decade, what was it and why was it so low?
Well, the growth rate was about 10%, which, as you said, is the lowest that we've had since the boom years after World War II. And the absolute increase was the slowest that we've had since the end of World War II as well. And I think we can attribute that to the high cost of living in California generally, and San Diego has an increased disadvantage because wages are relatively low compared to housing prices. People have opportunities to go elsewhere, and I think they oftentimes do.
So because the cost of living is so high in San Diego with home prices, rentals, gasoline prices, can we expect the growth rates in the county to slow down even more?
Well, I think we could anticipate that. I mean, the increase that we had this last decade was less than Sandag had projected that it would be. And unless we get a big boost in the economy, which nobody at the moment is seeing where that would come from. But unless that happens, then I think the slowdown in the growth will continue, at least for the next several years.
Now, the number of non-Hispanic whites went from 55% to 48%. Why, and was that expected?
Well, there was a continuation of a trend in the 90s. So we did lose non-Hispanic white population in the 1990s, and actually we lost fewer non-Hispanic whites this last decade than we did then. We are now, though, for the first time, as you indicate, a majority-minority county. At the same time, because we have a large Asian population, we are not in the same situation as every other border county, which is a Latino majority county. We probably won't be there for another decade.
Okay. Now, we did see, though, a rise in Latinos, a rise in the number of Asians. How much of that increase was due to migration patterns versus birth rates?
Well, it's a combination. We don't have the numbers yet to give us an exact figure on that, but certainly in both of those groups, we have continuing migration into the county. And in both of those groups, but particularly in the Latino group, we have relatively high birth rates. Indeed, the average Latino woman in the United States today is giving birth to more children than the average woman living in Mexico. So that does contribute to the growth rate. And in both cases, though, the Asian and Latino populations are relatively young. And so they, even if they're having a low birth rate, they will be contributing a disproportionate share of the population.
Now, we also saw a decline in the number of African Americans living in San Diego County. It was a slight decline. It went from 7.5% to 7%. Do we know why that is?
Well, although it's a slight decline, the decline was actually twice as fast as the non-Hispanic white decline. And two things are happening with the African American population. One, they're moving, they're suburbanizing, and secondly, they too are finding opportunities elsewhere in the United States.
Very quickly now, what is the practical effect of these population changes for San Diego County?
Well, the practical changes are that if we look at redistricting, then obviously everybody who has a district that needs to have its lines redrawn will likely find them redrawn because we've suburbanized, we've gone particularly north over the last 10 years, and that will affect certain political elements in the county.
Professor Weeks, thank you for speaking to us.
You're very welcome.
Women in the military remain excluded from engaging in combat, but that does not mean they're not serving in combat. What it does mean, though, is leadership positions within the military are out of reach because women don't officially have combat experience. Reporter Allison St. John is with me now to talk about a story she did this week on how women in uniform are working as agents of peace in war zones. Allison, you went to the largest gathering of women in the military this week here in San Diego, and what you heard there was women saying they're constantly exposed to combat. How close are they getting to the fighting?
Well, the thing is that the conflicts that the United States is in now, there are no front lines as such, so you can't be sent to the front lines. Anywhere you are, you're at risk. We had Tammy Duckworth, who was there, who lost her legs. She's a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, lost her legs in combat, saying, look, this is a moot point. Women are in combat, whatever you say. We heard from people from Camp Pendleton who had been part of female engagement teams, they call them, who actually go out into the community and talk to women and men, in fact, about what's going on, sort of creating relationships. And any time you set foot out of, say, the green zone, you know, you are in danger and you need to be prepared to defend yourself. So the statistics tell the story. You know, there's more than 100 women have died since 2001 in Iraq and Afghanistan in combat-related activities, and more than 700 have been wounded.
So, for all intents and purposes, they are in combat. Is the military in denial about this?
Well, you might say, no, they're not. They're looking at this right this minute, and I think it's really interesting because the Military Leadership Diversity Commission has released a report just this week making a recommendation that they eliminate this, no women in combat, because it is just theoretical. They're talking about the fact that they need to have more diversity in leadership, and women are being prevented from rising in the ranks because so much of what makes you, eligible for promotion is if you've served in combat. So this is a recommendation which I think the context is interesting because one of the recommendations also says that the shortage of people available now to serve in the military is becoming a threat to national security, and they want to expand the pool. So it's in that context, I think, that we're now looking at ending that exclusion.
There was also a significant shift for women that took place 10 years ago. What was that turning point?
Well, the UN Security Council in the year 2000 passed a resolution 1325 recognizing the role of women in peacekeeping efforts and rebuilding stability after conflict. And that really started to change the attitudes. And at this conference, which I have to say was a very encouraging conference, over 1,000 women said that the attitudes have been changing, but there hasn't been enough action.
And how important are these non-combat roles?
That's the interesting thing, that as the role of the United States perhaps changes and becomes one more of maintaining stability and building relationships and creating democracies, the kinds of roles that women are serving in are becoming more and more crucial and therefore need to be recognized in terms of promotional opportunities.
Very quickly now, a lot of these women are serving in countries that traditionally view women as homemakers and as mothers. How do they view American women in uniform?
Well, the woman from Camp Pendleton that I spoke to said when she first went out there, the women in Afghanistan were shocked to see female Marines, but they soon got used to the idea and started really interacting with them, asking them to help them to build businesses, you know, treating them as helpful helpmates and equals, and they're playing an incredibly important role in terms of what's being done by the U.S. out in Afghanistan.
Alison, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Graffiti has evolved into an art form prized by museums and art collectors. But many young aspiring graffiti artists are sometimes publicly associated with gangs or crime. From our Fronteras desk, Ruxandra Guidi tells us some organizations are trying to change this view.
These graffiti pieces outside the Euclid Avenue trolley station in southeast San Diego haven't been painted over for more than 15 years. But around the city, it's difficult to find tagging that hasn't been removed, unless you go to what's known as a legal wall. Just 2 blocks from the station, a graffiti artist who goes by the name Crower has spent all morning on a piece.
The reason I picked the corner is because it had just a bunch of tags in the background, and like this one, I didn't want to cover the heart because it looked like the guy spent a long time, and I didn't have a roller when I came here today. So I was hoping they would have one here because I usually come here and they have extra paint, extra bucket paint. I came here, they didn't have any, so I just picked this spot because there's already all like tags and stuff. There's no mural or anything on it.
Crower is practicing his lettering at Writer's Block, a decade-old community group which provides street artists with a safe space, about a dozen walls, where they can spray paint and practice their graffiti work. Crower says he'd much rather paint here than out in the streets, where he'd have to be watching out for the police.
Part of the reason why I do graffiti is so a lot of people can appreciate my art and see it. And this is the type of place where a lot of people come here and check out art. So if one of my pieces is on the walls and other people see it, you know, then that's what gives me pleasure, is having other people look at my art and like it. So to me, it's not really the brush. It's just the art. It's just painting.
But to some people, the thrill of graffiti is in the chase. In San Diego, graffiti vandalism can be charged as a felony or a misdemeanor. Police today use digital photography and GPS technology to catch suspects and prosecute more taggers. Marcus Cutfather Tufono is a DJ and program administrator at Writer's Block.
There's always going to be somebody that's going to go and grab a can and go and spray paint their name on public or private property as a way to try to gain some type of attention to themselves, for whatever case they do it. Our job and our goal and our mission is to take that tag and put it on a wall, and from that wall, put it on a computer screen and some software, put it on a t-shirt, help them to make a portfolio so that they could take their art and utilize it around the community, create partnerships and resources and networking capabilities that are in place, or at least get them in place so that artists have a chance to really prosper through their art.
Tufono believes that things are beginning to change.
It's great. It's a beautiful thing.
Street artists like Banksy have become world famous, and many taggers are learning the skills of graffiti in the classroom. The hope is that by offering a safe space for taggers, aspiring artists will stay out of trouble, promote their work, and even get commissioned.
And here in San Diego especially, we have so much lack of funding in the schools for art programs as well as music programs. It's almost as if creativity is not really a big, not a priority. In a lot of cities, it's not just San Diego, but since we deal on a local level, we make it a point to do as much as we can to find the funding, to find the partnerships, to find the resources, to get the city involved, get the community involved.
One of those budding partnerships is between Writer's Block and the Anti-Graffiti Task Force of the San Diego Police Department. Their hope is that the legal wall model will soon take off.
That was Rixandra Guidi reporting. Earlier this year, San Diego graffiti artist Sane was fined $85,000, one of the most expensive vandalism charges in the city's history. And now, here's Peggy Pico with an update on what KPBS is working on for next week.
Thanks, Amitha. Tune into KPBS Morning Edition on Monday to find out about California's earthquake warning system. And on these days, tax tips from the IRS and California Franchise Tax Board.
Thanks, Peggy. You can comment on any of the stories you saw tonight by going to our website at kpbs.org/SDweek. We'd love to hear from you. And now, here's a look at your weekend weather forecast. Thanks for watching. Good night.